Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. As we have promised since day one of this video podcast, we're getting the best on here. And we have one of them now. She has been a groundbreaker in her time, has set the stage for many that follows. And her name is Julie Krone, the only woman to this day to ever win a Triple Crown race. That was a 93 Belmont aboard Colonial Affair. She is in every Hall of Fame you can imagine, including, of course, the first woman to ever be inducted into the National Museum Racing Hall of Fame in Saratoga, New York. That was in 2000. And she joins us now from her home in the Los Angeles area. Julie, great to have you with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's wonderful to be talking to you and talking about one of my favorite things, racing.
Well, you know it as well as anyone. I mean, looking back, what a career. I'm just going to say from now, Julie Krone, Hall of Famer, because I've run out of Hall of Fames for you. You're in the National Women's Hall of Fame. You're in the Cowgirl Hall of Fame, and in your native state of Michigan, in the Michigan Sports Hall of Fame. Where do you put all the trophies?
I wish they were all paying me money to be in all those Hall of Fames. That would be cool. There's not really, there's a couple of cool plaques and stuff like that, but boy, it sure is a big honor, and it's such a special thing to be recognized like that, right? It's like crazy. And I found out a fun fact when I was in the Cowgirl Hall of Fame. I found out that there's two women in history that are in the National Women's Hall of Fame and the Cowgirl Hall of Fame, and it's Julie Krone and Annie Oakley, and I thought that was pretty good company.
Wow, two sharp shooters for sure.
Exactly. I've been accused of other things, but yeah, we'll say sharpshooters. It was a big thrill. Somebody walked up to me at the museum because we were just in the Cowgirl Museum, and at the Cowgirl Hall of Fame in Texas, and a lady walked up to me and told me that fun fact, and I was like really quite honored.
Wow, you should be. Talk about a couple of names: Annie Oakley, Julie Krone. How do you get in the Cowgirl Hall of Fame though? A Michigander who made her career on the racetrack in the Hall of Fame there, and gets to the Cowgirl.
Well, they tell the people that the definition of the cowgirl is a trailblazer, or someone who has done something, a female that has done something in a way that breaks barriers and does it in a special way by being like maybe the only female competing against boys and stuff like that. Because there's a lot of different categories in the Cowgirl Hall of Fame. There's artist and other things like that. So if you're a trailblazer and you did something special and got people's attention, I guess.
Well, you've certainly been getting people's attention since you debuted in 1981. And now we see, and Rosie Napravnik recently retired and all that, we know, and Rosemary Holmeister is still racing, but it's still not commonplace for a female jockey. And certainly in 1981, there were very few out there racing. So how in the world did you say, I'm going to go in there and go into this man sport and not even jump into the man sport, but I'm going to win races and do things that no one's ever done?
Well, it's kind of nice to have this month be the National Women's Month, right?
Right.
And so we've been tweeting a little bit, and it was really fun to watch Donna Barton tweet, or to look at Donna Barton's tweet the other day on her mom.
Oh, yeah.
Patty Barton, and how she was such an accomplished jockey and like just did things that no girl jockeys ever did. And then obviously before her, Kathy Kustner and all those guys, but the whole history is really fun to go over this month, and my husband Jay has been posting a couple of my older pictures, and it's been making me laugh because going back. But then I really remember like sitting there with I had The Lady as a Jock. It's a book on all the trailblazing women in the beginning, and one of them was Donna Barton's mom and Patty Barton, and the other like Cheryl White, and who else was in there? Diane Crump, and some other girls that they were my heroes. And I read the book, and it was so funny because if you read the book now, the quippy kind of, oh, look at these ladies, like how they're you know what I mean? It was just ridiculous because it was even harder for them,
right?
Being even more of a novelty than it was within the next 10 years when I came along. So, I mean, I didn't have anybody, throwing rocks at my trailer, and I, didn't have to get dressed like Rochelle Lee. She was a jockey on the East Coast, and she rode, it was kind of interesting. She rode at Gulfstream Park one time when I was there, and she was oh my gosh, what a cool lady she was. And she was like, first time I ever rode at Gulfstream Park, I got dressed in the first stage room because there was no place for girl jockeys to get dressed. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. But then, like when I went to Santa Anita, the jockeys room wasn't even set up for a girl to ride back-to-back races. So the girls' quarters at Santa Anita were at the end of the paddock, and it was this little tiny room, and it was so funny, Kenny. It had this shower. It had this little tiny shower, and it had this 5-gallon tank, like when you're in a trailer almost, to take a shower.
Yeah.
And if Joy Scott took a shower before me, or like her and I both, like if we both rode the last race, it wasn't enough hot water for 2 people. Like you had to wait for the thing to reheat, fill back up and heat. And so that was just, if you look at it, it's it's ridiculous to think. So what I did was, and I've done it before, so I didn't mind. So at Monmouth Park, it was impossible for me to get back to the back room to go back and get dressed every time. So they built a half partition, put up my bucket, hung my silks, there was a little room off the paddock that the guy used to use for the papers, and then there was like a TV in there. It was kind of like a paddock office.
Yeah.
But it had plenty of room, so I just asked the guys, I was like, can we just set up a little partition and then let me change my clothes? I had a mirror back there and stuff, and so I would just change in between and freshen up and whatever in a little partitioned room at Monmouth Park. And it's kind of crazy if you think about it, because I was leading rider there all those years.
Yeah.
And I didn't even have a proper place that that has access for back-to-back racing. So I'm not cutting Santa Anita down, but then they ended up making a girls' jockeys room inside the guys' room, which is how it should be anyway. First of all, for safety, and second of all, just you're supposed to have access to the other people. You're not supposed to be isolated just because of your gender. Like maybe obviously for showering and changing clothes, but not for communicating and like convivial times and stuff like that.
Right.
Anyway,
and that's why you're the trailblazer. I mean, look what you've done. You got him to finally get something going there at Santa Anita. Julie is the only woman to win riding championships, by the way, at Gulfstream and at Belmont and at Monmouth. Among your many
leading money winner at Del Mar.
And leading money winner at Del Mar, among your many accomplishments. What was it like when you first started beating the boys? Okay, you show up in 81, and you're not quite the novelty, but again, like you said, it wasn't like the racing world was welcoming female jockeys. And now not only are you there, but you start beating these guys. What was that like among the jockey colony? Did the boys have anything to say to you, or maybe not even spoke to you? I don't know.
I know. There's a nice mixture, Oh my gosh, I have the sweetest story. David Penna, he passed away, but he was a really accomplished jockey. So listen to this. He did this funniest thing one day, Kenny. So I had just when I got to Tampa Bay Downs, I climbed the fence because they wouldn't let us in. And then I walked along the back side, and then I went to the road, and a lady trainer picked me up, or a lady assistant trainer picked me up, and luck has have it, she was like, oh, my husband helps one jockey every year, and it might as well be a girl this year. And I was like, yay! So I got in the car, and my mom was right behind me driving in, and I waved to her, and I was like, follow us, because I got a job already. And so she followed me to the barn, and we went to the barn of Jerry Pace. So Jerry Pace kind of guided me and helped me and stuff, and I walked around with all my pictures, my photographs from riding at the fair tracks.
Yeah.
And so obviously I'm down on my horse, and people can see I got a little bit of underneath me because I rode 150 races at the fair tracks. I won a lot of races, so I had some win pictures and stuff like that, so it was kind of cool.
Yeah.
So Davy Penna was one of the really, really nice ones. So there's a lot of people that were super nice and really helpful. And then there was other people that were just like, you're just a girl and you stink no matter what. So, but not very much of that. But Davy Penna one day, so I'm coming around the turn, and I'm getting really excited when I go around the turn, when I start to have horse, and my horse kind of my horses were drifting out, turning for home, because I think I was actually a little better on the bull ring track than once I got to Tampa, and the turn was so sweepy, and I kind of lost my way a little.
Right.
Kenny, I must have gone 5 or 6 wide, like 3 or 4 races in a row. Just rode terrible, right? Like, just awful. And so Davey Penna, we're up in the jockeys room, and it's after training hours, so it's like 10:30 in the morning, and the jockeys go up to the jockeys room to have their food. And so Davey Penna goes, "Hey, Julie." And he had such a beautiful smile, and he's like dark hair. He's a handsome guy. He was really funny, too. He goes, "Hey, Julie, come on. I want to show you. I got somebody I want you to meet." And I said, okay. So, like, it happened all the time in the room. You know, somebody'd be like, "Oh, this little girl, she wants to be a jockey. You're her hero," you know, and stuff like that, right?
Right.
So anyway, so Davey Penna goes, come on downstairs. And I said, okay. So I left my food, my lunch I was eating, and I walked downstairs, and then you go outside at Tampa Bay Downs, and then you're in the paddock, and then you go across like the saddling stalls, and then you go into the paddock. He goes, "Come on, keep coming. I want to show you something." He said, "I want to introduce you to somebody." And I said, okay. And we walk across the paddock where the horses parade, and then he goes, "Come here, keep going, follow me." And I said, okay. And we walk out onto the track, and we walk to the inside rail, and he pats the inside rail, and he goes, "This is the inside rail. I'd like you to introduce you to it." And I'm like, "Oh, hello, inside rail." And he goes, "The object is to stay as close to this as possible around the turn." And oh my gosh, isn't that great, Kenny?
Oh, that is great, Julie. That's wonderful.
And what he did was he had all the jocks in the room. He had all the jocks in the room, all at the top of the stairs and looking out the windows, like laughing at me. So it was really fun to be part of the gang, you know, and like have camaraderie. And that's one of the best parts of being a jockey, you know.
Yeah.
Is all the stuff that goes on in the jock room and stuff. So I had plenty of really good stuff and plenty of good stories where I had to be competitive or fighting with somebody. But there's also some really fun, endearing times. And only one other thing ever reminded me of that when I was riding at Santa Anita. I was pouty one day when Lafitte went by me, and he went by me and kind of shaved me a little bit on the turn, and then my horse came back on, and I just got beat ahead. So I was kind of mad. Like he kind of just was Lafitte and outrode me a little bit, you know?
Right.
And it's a little bit of humble pie, and you get mad. So I claimed foul on him.
Uh-huh.
And like almost right when I did it, I kind of regretted it. I was like, oh well, you know. But I just sometimes you have to do that too because it helps the trainer and the owner. Like instead of you saying like, oh, I got pinched a little on the turn, and then you know that might have cost me the race. But instead of not claiming foul, then they'd be like, well, you could at least try to claim foul, you know, like, or at least it helps your case if you lose and you're pouty, you know?
Yeah.
So I get back to the jockey room, and Lafitte is still outside on the telephone talking to the stewards. But when I get back to the room, oh my gosh, the harassing I got. So what the guys did to me were I think it was like Gary Stevens and Mike Smith and Victor, and like it was just hysterical. And I forgot who else. Somebody else did it too. I think it was Alex Solis.
Solis, yeah.
Yeah, so Solis, he gets this big, gigantic, plastic, bright green Mr. Magoo glasses, right? They're like from a comedy store.
Yeah.
And some tissue like Kleenex.
Uh-huh.
And they stand me in the middle of the jockey's room, and they put a dunce cap on me. And then when Lafitte walks in, that's what he sees, me standing there with the dunce cap, the big Mr. Magoo glasses, and the Kleenex. Because I was a crybaby, I couldn't see, and I'm a dunce.
See, they welcomed you, didn't they?
Exactly, yeah. It was pretty funny.
That's been welcomed in the guys' world, yeah.
Yeah, so there was plenty of competition and plenty of times when I had, you know, to constantly prove myself, or some jockey hated me just because I was a girl, or some trainer that wouldn't ride me. But there was plenty of good times too, you know, with the camaraderie and the fun and the jockey's room.
We're talking to the Hall of Famer Julie Krone, who has won more races, over 3,700, than any female jockey to this time, and is the only one to win a Triple Crown race, of course, the 93 Belmont on Colonial Affair, among her many accomplishments. And we're talking about the camaraderie with the jockeys. And if you think about it, in most sports, you know, you guys are coming back and forth between races, like you were talking about them having some fun, razzing each other and razzing you. It's really interesting to me, always fascinated me, Julie, that you compete with somebody, you go back, you're going to compete with them again. You know, it's not like you go to separate. You know, you don't go to one end of the end zone and then you meet back out. It's.
I know exactly right. The two Super Bowl teams are both in the same locker room.
Right. Yeah. It's exactly. That's a perfect analogy. I mean, that's got to be. I guess it can be fun and a little tense at times, and I don't know, especially on big race days. You know, the big cap at Santa Anita, or a Triple Crown race, or a Breeders' Cup race.
Exactly. Or Kentucky Derby. You can
Kentucky
see
Derby.
the tension.
Yeah.
When they film it, because it has such good coverage, you can see how nervous everybody is. So one time, so I have a daughter now, and she's 13. So as she was going through her ages, I noticed that there's certain grades, like when she was in like second grade, it just was so, like every day I pick her up from school, and it was like, I hate Cindy. And then the next day, Cindy's my best friend. And the next day, I hate Cindy. I hate Tommy. I love Tommy. He's my best friend. Like, oh my God, I couldn't even stay on the journey with her, right? I'd be like, well, what'd they do? And like she kicked me in my leg and told me I was fat. You know what I mean? Like, it was just like, oh my God, every day there was some kind of battle that went on. And so it reminded, and I started to be like, well, do you want me to talk to her mother? And like, I was going on every journey with her every day, you know, like I was all like, because I'm her parent, I'm supposed to worry if she's having trouble with people, or like, or, oh, I hate that teacher. Oh, I love that teacher the next day. And then finally I was just like, I talked to some other moms, and they were like, oh, don't even pay attention. Just be like, you know, just be like, oh yeah, what happened, babe? And just like talk about it and let it go, and then they'll love them tomorrow. So one day, it was at Aqueduct, and we were just getting ready, I think, to go to we were all getting ready to go to Gulfstream, or maybe just to the Belmont. Yeah, maybe to Belmont. But anyway, it was right at the end of the meet, and I think Antley and I were getting pretty competitive with each other. And Billy Mott was standing there, and Antley shaved me, but then I still beat him, and we were like pulling up, and I was like, take that, you jerk, you shaved me in the turn. And he's like, oh, come on, or something. And I was like, yeah, and I was like so mad at him, right? And then he got mad at me, and we were like, no, you shut up, you know, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so then we were fighting, and Billy Mott was like, what's wrong? And I was like, Antley is such a jerk, right? And he goes, so Bill was so mad. Even the next day, Drew came by, his agent of Antley came by to get him on a horse, and Mott was kind of like, well, I don't know, let me think about it, because he was really mad at Antley still, right?
Yeah.
For shaving the horse off, and I had to pull him up, and Mott went and watched the video, and now he's mad at Antley too. And so then the very next day we walk out, and Chris was like, he was really endearing and really like the sweet. Oh my God, he was so adorable. Yeah. How could you stay mad at Chris Antley, right? And so Chris Antley had his arm around me. He's like, "Oh, come on, Cronzone, you know I love you." And he's like, and I was like, "Okay, I forgive you." And so now Billy Mott, the very next day I rode for him, he sees me walking out in the paddock with Antley, and Antley had his arm around me. He was all kidding and joking and being all sweet. And he says, "Hey, Bill," and Bill's like, "Hey." And then Billy Mott looks at me and is like, "Oh my gosh, I thought you hated this guy yesterday." and so then when Lorelai went to school, it always reminded me of Billy Mott that day, like, you know, saying, "You just hated him. I'm mad at him too, and now you're like friends with him." And I was like, I guess that's how it goes. I was like, and I told him, I said, "How can you stay mad at Antley?"
Yeah, it's true. And you know, some trainers will say that jockeys are like teenage kids.
Yeah, but it was funny. Or second graders, whatever you pick.
Graders. Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, yeah.
You have one of the great love stories in racing, too. You and Jay Hovde, who is a well-respected daily racing form rider, one of the best in the business. You guys have been together a long time. Do you talk about racing every day? I mean, is it every day a racing story?
We do talk about racing. And you know something we've really been talking about? And I need to... Jay told me just yesterday, he says, you need to write an article, he said to me, which is kind of fun for the writer to tell the rider.
Yeah, especially a writer like Jay, yeah.
Yeah, because, well, at least I have him to edit, so that's good.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've been talking a lot about how racing is perceived and how to make it more attractive and, like, in ways that can have the public be more proud to say, like, oh, I love thoroughbred racing.
Right.
And there is seriously something that has always bothered me since I stopped riding, and then I kind of got into the Pirelli natural horsemanship stuff a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Pirelli and Monty Roberts and some of the guys, you know, like Bobby Duncan was the starter in New York, and he's worked with Pat and just got a wealth of information and to make the starting gate go smoother, and had all the guys sit in them, basic lessons with Pat and horse psychology, and every one of them is like smooth as butter and just have such a different approach when Pat was working with them and stuff, and we're just like slapping their hands on their foreheads going like, oh my gosh, I see it, I get it. The horse is so much better if X, Y, and Z is done this way.
Yeah.
So the no whip thing that I didn't get laughed at, but I was kind of like, oh my God, are you kidding me? In lieu of the things that have gone on at Santa Anita, I actually texted the other day. I was like, hey, you guys, my no whip thing is looking a little better now, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I was also just going through, my daughter homeschools, so we were just going through her history lesson today. And there was this wonderful analogy of a tree growing, and it was representing the Renaissance times. And it was talking about how the Dark Ages were like in the dirt, and then the Renaissance is going to be like the roots in the dirt, and then coming up from the roots was, art and reading and people becoming more educated. And so it was like a tree that was like a metaphor for like how Renaissance age came about, and people, the beautiful art came about, and people learned how to read, and it reminded me of racing right now. And it was like, can there be a leap that's taken that puts us into a different league of our relationship with the horse, that's going to, in the long run, help the horse become a better athlete and last longer?
Yeah.
And it's obviously portrayed in a strange way, the jockey like hitting the horse, like whipping the horse. It doesn't, sometimes it just doesn't work for certain people, and especially if there's a catastrophic breakdown connected with a jockey driving a horse like that,
Right.
So, in lieu of my journey that I went on with my natural horsemanship, first of all, my blazing denial and like just anger at how stupid it was, and like how like, what the heck? So then I started to think of how the Renaissance thing what my daughter was just going through could be a lot like racing right now. Like sometimes the worst things happen, or things happen between people where you get in a fight or something.
Right.
And then you find out more about the person through the altercation than you would have in the long run, and they end up being one of your best friends because you learn more about them and how they handle things that aren't like that pleasant sometimes.
No, what? That's a great point, because not trying to jump in here on like with this show, we're trying to do this with this show is bring on people like you who have meant something to the sport, people that are meaning something to the sport now, and hear their stories. I think that racing, another thing that, in my opinion, Julie, and I know it's the backbone of it, you got to have gambling. I know that's what keeps the tracks going. I'm not naive to this. But I think sometimes, especially when they're marketing, the NTRA Breeders' Cup, the marketing always seems to emphasize, let's talk about the gambling first. And my thing is, well, you got to get the people out there, like it was for me years ago, to meet people like Julie Krone and others in the sport and get to know them and find out a little more about them. Then you get interested. I can't imagine if you went to like a Dodgers game out there and the first thing you have to do is start betting who's going to win the game. Maybe you'd like to watch a little bit of it to see what the game's about. That's one thing I think horse racing could use too, is let people have some fun and learn a little bit of the sport, and then they can learn how to wheel a trifecta.
Yeah, that's crazy that you said that, because when I retired and I went up to the I was the opposite. I went up to the press box after I retired, and I was at Hollywood Park one day.
Right.
And I stood there and I was like, hey, I want to bet this race, because I kind of was watching them in the post parade, and I did the paddock analysis, right? So I ran upstairs and I watched the horses leave the paddock, and I was like, oh yeah, I want to bet like the 4, 5, 7. And I walked up and I was like, yeah, can I get the 4, 5, 7 in that swirly thing? I said to the guy, right? And one of the people behind me was like, wow, we know Julie Krone wasn't one of those jocks that bet from the room, that's for sure.
Right. That's exactly right.
Thing.
Oh.
Yeah.
She's been on the cover of Sports Illustrated. She's been an ESPY Award winner for the best female athlete. We're glad to have Julie Krone on with us, who was on the Tonight Show and Letterman Show. And I believe, were you on the Tonight Show? Was it Leno? Was he hosting it then?
Johnny Carson.
That's what I thought.
Johnny Carson.
So what was Johnny Carson like? Because to me, I think he's still the quintessential host.
So cool. It was funny because when I got there, he had his jacket off and he was in the green room.
Uh-huh.
And I walked in and I was looking at him from behind, and he has his jacket off, and so all I see is this really handsome, good-looking dude with this cute butt. And this, like, he's all ripped arms, you know, his muscles in his arms and stuff, really fit, good hair. And he turns around and it's like this old guy, and I was like, ah! And I was like, and it's Johnny Carson. So, and then he is just so funny, like every single like thing, and he loved racing so much. He had a lot of racing friends.
Yeah.
And even in spite of our the difference, like his group that he was around was a different, like, you know, like would be like an older group of jockeys and stuff that I read about in books and stuff. And then up to date kind of a thing was like the other riders in California and stuff. But I had only been on the East Coast. So it was really a fun and exciting thing. And just the novelty of meeting Johnny Carson and being on the show was just bragging rights forever. I just loved it.
Oh, yeah. And you can follow Julie at, is it I Love Horses?
Well, yeah, on Twitter, yeah.
It's EYE, by the way. I
Correct.
Love Horses. And that's where you can follow Julie on Twitter. And she's got some great insight as we've been hearing about racing, some great ideas about racing. She's a motivational speaker, an equine consultant, and one of the great people in racing. And I really mean that. I always enjoyed when I got to interview you and just seeing you at the track because you were always happy. I mean, you know, even you would lose a race, and not that you were thrilled about it, but you still were upbeat. And, you know, I always remember that because, as we know, not everyone is happy. Some of these guys, even after they win a race, aren't necessarily happy to talk to you.
Yeah, I used to say that to people, like, man, you just won. Aren't you going to smile and be happy?
Yeah.
Rawr, 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 you know?
Yeah, I know. I've talked to them.
Exactly. Exactly.
Will you come back sometime with us? We'd love to have
certainly.
you. We'd love to have you back on. And you know, I've never interviewed anyone that we talked about Annie Oakley until now, by the way.
So far anyway.
And that's from Julie Krone, who is in the Cowgirl Hall of Fame. The only two women, Annie Oakley, Julie Krone, trailblazers. And she carried on a tradition. She opened it up even more in blazing a trail for the female jockeys of today. Julie, it's been a great pleasure having you on, and please come back.
My pleasure. Thanks, Kenny.
All right. Thank you. And thank you for watching us again this week here on the Horse Racing Show. We hope that you like and subscribe to us on YouTube. You can follow us on iTunes and Google Play. We're at Horse Racing Show on Twitter and the Horse Racing Show in Facebook if you'd like to look at us. We'll be back with more right after this.